Welcome back to Liberty Bites on the Think Liberty Network. I'm your host, William Gadsden. You can follow me personally on Twitter at William_Gadsden or check out my Facebook page at William Gadsden Political Commentator. Check out Think Liberty on Facebook, Twitter, or whatever your favorite social media outlet is. Give us a follow and a like for updates on new episodes and more. We also have a Patreon now, so if you'd like to support our work, head on over to patreon.com/ThinkLibertyPatrons. And of course, as always, the most helpful thing you can do is share this episode on all of your different social media platforms. And as an added bonus, it's free to do. So for this episode, I want to talk about the hilariously biased stream of articles that's been coming out recently about the Boogaloo Bois. And there it is. I'm now on another watch list. That's fine. I collect them like I used to collect Pokemon cards. So basically, this is the new boogeyman for the left, the Boogaloo Bois. So we've got two particular articles that I want to go through, one from the New York Times, one from Vice, but all within a span of about 2 weeks. You've had articles essentially along the exact same stream of thought and tone here from Huffington Post, the Daily Beast, BuzzFeed, Gizmodo, and of course the New York Times and Vice.com. And they're all bringing about this new narrative about how dangerous these Boogaloo Boy types are. Now, isn't it strange that all of these big name sites are starting to release similar or almost the exact same narrative in such a very small span of time? Could it be that it's because all of the main media outlets are run by the 6 same companies and they all collaborate together? I don't know. Draw your own conclusions. But anyway, for those of you that are uninitiated, the idea of the Boogaloo Boys is something that kind of caught on with social media, as a lot of these things do. But the idea is that these are guys that are sick of government overreach, government control. They want to live their own lives. I mean, a lot of them are just angry libertarians. And a lot of these self-identified Boogaloo Boys that I know personally are used to be conservatives, like just mainstream conservatives. And then they have since just been disillusioned by the base GOP, the base conservatives. And now they're just sick and tired of everything. They're tired of the way things are going, much like I do. They see the duopoly, the GOP and the Democrats, as two sides of the same authoritarian coin. You know, they're both headed towards similar goals, just maybe in different focused areas, but they're using the same tactics. They're both clamping down on civil liberties, and these guys are sick of it. But of course, as you go through these articles, let's take the New York Times, for example. You've got the focus around white supremacy. So the title is "The Coronavirus Becomes a Battle Cry for U.S. Extremists." White supremacists seek to stoke the fear and disruption caused by the pandemic to push their agenda and recruit. So right out the gate, you've got this accusation of white supremacy. And then, of course, the picture, the thumbnail you've got here is American flags, Gadsden flags. You got some Hawaiian shirts mixed into the crowd there. So right out the gate, white supremacy. Now you juxtapose that with the picture, Gadsden flags, American flags. And for years, the media has been trying to tie the Gadsden flag, of all things, very simple message, don't tread on me, into some sort of symbol of white supremacy. And it's just not there. But they keep trying to tie that together. So right out the gate, white supremacy. They reference a protest that happened on the 20th. And they say April is typically a busy month for white supremacists. There's Hitler's birthday, which they contort into a celebration. There's the anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing, the domestic terrorist attack 25 years ago that killed 168 people, et cetera, and still serves as a rallying call for new extremist recruits. But this April, blah, 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 they go into the protests and such. You know what else people celebrate on 420? Smoking weed, does that make them white supremacists? Does that make them extremists? Yeah, they're celebrating weed on Hitler's birthday. You see how this works? They take these completely unrelated things and put them in the same article to conflate all of them and say that these are all in line with each other. These are all connected. And they call, folks like me a conspiracy theorist. So they talk about the protests. They reference a guy named Devin Berghart, who is a veteran researcher of white nationalists, who runs the Institute for Research and Education on Human Rights, et cetera, et cetera. So they're making the case here that the coronavirus pandemic and the open America, open this state or that state is somehow tied to white supremacy and it's tied to white nationalism. No, dude, these people are just sick of not being able to go to work and feed their families. They're sick of the government telling them where they can go, when they can go, what they need to be wearing when they go. They can't go to work. You have to stay home. You can't buy this. You can't buy that. You have to take these measures. They're sick of that. They're not trying to start a frickin' race war. So they also reference the protest, I believe it was in January, in Richmond, Virginia, the big Second Amendment rally there. You had guys in luau shirts. So, again, for those uninitiated, Boogaloo, Big Igloo, Big Luau, they're basically all just mononyms off of the Boogaloo reference. So, Big Luau, you wear Hawaiian shirts, you wear luau shirts. It's hilarious, okay? It's a meme come to life. It's not some sort of, villainous conspiracy. And there's the puppet masters, steepling their fingers together and saying, yes, everything is going according to plan. It's just a bunch of dudes that think it's funny that are also really pissed off about what's going on, and they're making their voices heard. But no, you've got stuff like this. People like folks like the New York Times, like HuffPo, like BuzzFeed, like Vice, that want to conflate all of these unrelated things together and make these guys out to be the bad guys. Anyway, at that Richmond rally, you had Black people, you had Asians, you had Hispanic individuals, you had white people. You had people of every age, every race, every socioeconomic group. You had guys in suits. You had guys in full body armor and kit with luau shirts on. And they were all there supporting a similar narrative. There's a famous picture of an Asian guy that says armed minorities don't get bashed or something along those lines. This isn't a white supremacy movement. But they're not going to talk about any of that because these people aren't actual journalists. They're not interested in telling you the news, reporting the news. They're interested in setting and pushing an agenda. So blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go through this entire New York Times article. Look it up on your own. I encourage you to do so. But basically, they're just saying that this government crackdown, let's call it what it is, this government crackdown on the choices of individuals using the coronavirus as an excuse to do so is pissing off a lot of people. And they are trying to say that this white nationalist or white supremacist cabal is using it to recruit people. And by the way, it's called the Boogaloo movement. They go on to mention several individuals that have gone too far in some ways. There was a guy building pipe bombs that was going to booby trap his house in case it was raided. Folks like that, very, very scarce, very rare individuals, and then try to tie them in with everything else. And then they say, oh, and by the way, these rare individuals were also fans of or liked multiple Boogaloo pages on Facebook. Dude, there are millions of young, angry individuals, mostly male, that like those Boogaloo pages. And maybe they own a luau shirt too. Does that make them a white nationalist? Does that make them a white supremacist? Does that make them extremist? No, it doesn't. One other thing I want to point out here is when I first read a couple of these articles about a week ago, one of them at least supported this idea of white nationalism or white supremacism, white supremacy, by saying that there were Confederate flags and swastikas at some of these rallies. And then they showed a picture of one of said swastikas at the rally, and it was Governor Whitmer of Michigan with, painted up to look like Hitler. That's not celebrating the Nazis. That's actually saying that the Nazis were bad and comparing them to Governor Whitmer because they disagree with Governor Whitmer. That's not a celebration of Nazism or white supremacy. They actually put that picture in the article while claiming that their support for these accusations was based on swastikas being at the rally. Now, interestingly enough, as I'm scrolling through these two articles, that picture is nowhere to be found. It has been taken down, maybe because somebody with two brain cells to rub together saw that and they were like, yeah, this kind of actually this takes away from our argument. Let's take that down and republish this article. So anyway, you've got this NYT article, this New York Times article that doesn't even support the idea, give any supporting evidence for this accusation of white supremacy or white nationalism. Now, in this Vice article, which is comparably hilarious, they reference the incident in Odessa, Texas, in which there were armed protesters out front of a bar that was still being shut down. The owner of the bar decided to open it anyway, despite the orders of the governor, because, I don't know, she's losing money. She's losing her livelihood. And so there were armed protesters out front, and the local sheriff's department rolls up with a SWAT team and a freaking MRAP. So for those of you that aren't, veterans or military nerds, an MRAP is essentially a giant armored gun truck. I don't know why the sheriff's department of Ector County has a freaking MRAP, but they roll up. The protesters immediately threw up their hands because, I can only assume that they understood that if they get arrested, they can take it to court. They didn't actually do anything wrong, as far as I can tell. And that's a lot better than just getting gunned down and getting swept under the rug after a 2-week news cycle. So they reference that incident. They reference Duncan Lemp, who I've talked about before. And again, they do this conflationary tactic of saying, yes, and these guys were also fans of Boogaloo Facebook pages. Okay. Is that illegal now? Are we not allowed to do that? Anyway, they go on to say, white nationalist, white supremacist, again, with no supporting evidence at all. But as we know from Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, if you repeat a lie enough times, it becomes the truth. And that is exactly what these ostensible news outlets are shooting for. Make no mistake. So go through, read these two articles. The article from Vice is titled, "The Boogaloo Boys Are Bringing Their AR-15s and Civil War Ideology to the Lockdown Protests." So again, making this case that the coronavirus pandemic and the lockdowns from the government are being used as an excuse for these guys to recruit and to protest. Now, let's be clear. I go through their case. I want to talk about what's actually going on, or at least what my opinion of what going on is. What my opinion is of what's going on. Sorry, my coffee hasn't hit me yet. So what's actually going on here? You've got these protests in Michigan, Virginia, Texas, North Carolina, all over the state. And in a lot of cases, these folks are armed. One of these articles, I think it was the Vice article, references the armed protest in Michigan and says that protesters stormed the Capitol building, using this extremely hyperbolic, this extremely intense language. No, man. They waved to the security guards. The security guards waved them through. You have a right to protest. You have a right to carry on Capitol grounds. There was no storming of the building. This wasn't the, Soviet troops, taking the Reichstag at the end of World War II. So these guys are making their voices heard. Yes, the inclusion of firearms is a clear escalation, but that is because they are not being listened to by their elected representatives. That is exactly how this is supposed to work. You've got representatives like Justin Amash, who recently joined the Libertarian Party, saying something along the lines of, well, it's not a good look, essentially, to bring firearms to a protest because it'll make people feel intimidated. Yeah, that's the point, Justin. That's the entire point. You bring these firearms because it is an escalation, because your voice isn't being heard, and you're showing your elected officials that are supposed to work for you, like you, Mr. Amash, they are showing you that you are not representing them in the way that you should be. You are not doing the job that you were hired for. This is exactly how democracy is supposed to work. This is exactly how protests, how the First Amendment, how the Second Amendment is supposed to work. The balance of power in a constitutional republic that we have is from the people to the government, not from the government to the people. The government doesn't say, well, you're allowed to do this and that, or at least they're not supposed to. The people are offering the government power, offering to allow the government to borrow power from them. What's the saying? The consent of the governed and this sort of thing. So the power transfer is from the people to the government. And if the government oversteps their bounds, people have a right, a responsibility, and a duty to take that power back from the government. And this is exactly how you do it. You protest, you do chants, you wave your signs. If that doesn't work, maybe you start bringing firearms. Maybe you wear a big luau shirt. If it escalates from there, I'm not going to say what I think will happen, to be frank with you. But listen, these people will have their voices heard one way or another. The ball is in the court of the government to stand down because these people are serious. And it's only going to get worse if the government doesn't start listening to them. Now, as my last segment here for this episode, I also want to talk about a very interesting, although not very surprising, double standard in the media. So you've got these Boogaloo Boys, the Big Luau, Big Igloo individuals that are coming out armed. They're not attacking anybody. Not a single shot has been fired in any of these protests, including the ones where you have armed individuals going into Capitol buildings in Kentucky and Michigan. Not a single shot has been fired, even when they're standing toe-to-toe against police SWAT teams, law enforcement SWAT teams. Not a single shot has been fired. But these guys are being made out to be the boogeymen, the extremists, but not a word about Antifa. I know they've been out of the news for quite a while. Don't make no mistake, they are still operating around the country. So you've got Antifa, a group made up of anarcho-communists, that see violence is the only way forward, and they have no problem with dishing that violence out. You have multiple examples of these folks causing millions of dollars of property damage, of sending people to the hospital. You've got the bike lock guy. You've got the milkshake slinging with quick dry cement in it. You've got dudes with asps going after. So basically, it's like a big metal rod that you can basically collapsible rod that you can use as a melee weapon. Going after people. Do you understand the difference I'm trying to drive home here? You've got an example of a truly extremist ideology on the one hand that has a long history of attacking people and causing property damage against people that they disagree with, and not a peep from the media. No, I take that back. Not a peep from the media. You had folks on CNN comparing these guys to the folks that stormed Omaha Beach in Normandy during World War II. They praised these people because they're ostensibly anti-fascist. But no making them out to be boogeymen. No calling them extremists. No causing or expressing remorse or saying that they shouldn't be doing these things. No, let them play. So while these guys, literally Antifa podcasts, discuss how they would wage an insurgency in the South and in parts of the West, because those are right-wing strongholds, they're openly talking about assassinations, car bombings, using gray man tactics. Not a peep from the mainstream media about why they shouldn't be talking like that. But you got guys that go to a protest that are polite while armed. They're polite. Not a single shot is fired. Nobody is attacked. They make their voices heard and they go home. And they're the extremists. They're the ones that you're going to excoriate in the media. Are you joking? That's what we're looking at right now. And it's just, obviously I'm pretty fired up about this because it's just absolutely infuriating. And there are enough people that click on those articles myself aside, that click on those articles, give these big media corporations ad revenue and whatever else. But even more importantly, they see these articles, they read them, and they believe them. Because they're not interested in what the truth is. They're interested in seeing their side propped up by these big media outlets. Tell me I'm wrong. I don't know. Those are just my thoughts on it. We'll see what happens. I'm a little nervous for what the future holds for us. But let's be very clear. These are not the bad guys. These are not the bad guys. The bad guys are groups like Antifa that use violence as a first step. You've got the bad guys are people in law enforcement and in local, state, and federal governments that are enforcing these unconstitutional decrees, these unconstitutional edicts. Those are the bad guys. These people exercising their First and Second Amendment rights, these are not the bad guys. I guess that's all I got. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll come back next week to become more liberty-centered with us. I'm William Gadsden with Think Liberty.